Hello and welcome everyone to this live stream teaching from Marshall Vian Summers. And the topic Marshall will be speaking about today is preparing for the reality of contact with the greater community. My name's Tyne Andrews and I'll be the host for today's teaching from Marshall. And I'd like to share a little bit about Marshall. If you may not know, Marshall was ignited at a very young age spiritually and has a deep, ongoing relationship with a group of unseen spiritual teachers. And this has resulted in an amazing body of work. Marshall also has a very deep and ongoing connection with the subject he'll be talking about today. He has decades of insight, experience, knowledge of what is happening in our world and why. So he will be speaking about our local region of space and what is happening on the ground here in our world. And he'll be expanding on the bigger picture of what this is and what we are all facing. He has 20 books in publication that touch on almost every aspect of life. And these books and so much more are available on the newmessage.org website and speak about humanity's preparation for the environmental, social, political, and economic upheaval and changes in this world. And also, that covers what Marshall will be speaking about today regarding our world's emergence and contact with a universe full of intelligent life. So today we have the opportunity to hear Marshall speak on this really important subject, very timely topic. Preparing for the reality of contact with the greater community. So just to give you a quick overview of our time together today, we'll first hear from Marshall and he'll give a teaching on this topic. Then we'll go to the live broadcast chat on Discord for about 30 minutes to share our thoughts, our insights, and maybe some considerations about the questions that will be posed related to this topic today. And then we'll return here to the same YouTube channel for a brief discussion from Marshall. So I'm so glad that you are all here today to receive this important teaching from him. So with that, let us hear from Marshall about preparing for the reality of contact with the greater community.
Thank you, Tyne, for that introduction. I'm very happy to present this to you. It's going to be quite a presentation in terms of things to consider. I'm going to run through this to give you a bigger view of a topic that's actually very deep. I've written 3 books on this topic alone: Life in the Universe, the Greater Community, and Preparing for the Greater Community. So I'd like to begin by just defining some of the terms that I'll be using here today. I'll be using common words, but maybe in a different way. Starting with greater community. This is my term for life in the universe. It's not a community where everyone knows each other. It's not like a local community. It's just the whole volume of life in the universe, and particularly life in our region of space, which is having a great impact on the world today and will into the future. Next, I'll be talking about foreign alien intelligence, which I call NHI, non-human intelligence, but I'm talking about physical beings in physical craft from physical places, here for fairly prosaic reasons, which I will elaborate upon. Next, we'll talk about knowledge, which represents the deeper mind within us, the deeper spiritual mind that represents the eternal part of us, actually. It's the source and meaning of our spirituality, and it's a part of our intelligence we have to bring into facing all important matters in life, but particularly this, which has such great potential and consequences for better or worse in our future and even in what's occurring today in the world. And then there's the reality of contact. So I'm not speculating what contact could be or should be. It's just really what is. What is the evidential evidence? How can we approach this reality, this growing reality in our world, from a way where we don't betray ourselves, we don't fool ourselves or be fooled by it, to empower us and to educate us and to prepare us for living now in a greater community of intelligent life. And the reality of contact is our introduction to that. For we're not yet able to travel into space in a significant way, but races from space are here operating in our sphere. So I'm going to speak about that at depth. I've been focused on the spirituality of life in the universe, and because we all live in this universe. So what is spirituality, not just in our own world or in the traditions of our world, but what is the basis of spirituality in the universe? Because that affects all intelligent life. And in a way, it's foundational even for us here in the world. Foundational in how we regard ourselves, each other, how we interact with life and its difficulties and opportunities. And what I call greater community spirituality is actually what unites the world's religions, because they all have this ground of being, basically, which goes even beyond their histories and their philosophical positions to unite us with each other at a core level. So we'll be speaking about that too. I want you to know that I approached this issue of contact about 40 years ago. And I did it without preconceived notions. I did it without trying to make it validate what I believed in, validate spiritual ideas, practical ideas, philosophical ideas. I just said, what is it? I need to know what it is. Good or bad, I need to know what it is. And that has been my approach all along. So I didn't spend 40 years trying to validate myself by thinking of this phenomenon only in terms of how it fulfills or strengthens an overall position in life. That is not the case. So we have evidence of sightings and witness testimony and essential behavior of the NHI, the alien presence. And that has been the source of my inquiry. I know government disclosure is a very important topic, but the topic that is not being dealt with is disclosing the alien presence. Seems like nobody really wants to go there or feels able to go there, but that is really what we have to focus on. The government may or may not reveal some or all of its information. That remains to be seen. And that has benefits and liabilities associated with it for many reasons. But that is not the focus of my talk today. My focus today is disclosure about the NHI presence, the alien presence in the world. And I'm one of the few people that I know of in the world who's really talking about this in any kind of deep and broad spectrum way. My information has come from me not only from 40 years of inquiry and study, but also from communication from a great spiritual force that has provided guidance for me to know how to see and know this presence, has given me evidence of its behavior and its source. So I will be making that part of my presentation here with you today. And I want to emphasize that no one in the world has any idea what's going on beyond the world, really. All the projections of space beings and enlightened societies, and it's just purely projection of our own beliefs. We really stand at the threshold of a greater community of intelligent life, of which we know really nothing at all. We know perhaps the science of planets, how they move, the forces of the universe. We can witness, we can extrapolate from that in terms of understand perhaps other habitable worlds, but we know nothing about life in the universe. And of course, this is a big part of the picture of any kind of alien presence in the world. This explains why they're here and what they're planning to do. Otherwise, we're just giving that our own meaning, and usually a hopeful meaning, understandably. So, you have to broaden your spectrum here, because telepathic communication is how races communicate with each other, particularly out in space. They're sending messages to each other, text messages. If you broadcast into space, it's available to everyone. And there's a lot of intelligent life in the universe around us. We seem to live in a very well-inhabited part of the universe, which gives us certain benefits and certain liabilities. So the time I have with you here today, I'm going to give a broad overview. It's a huge subject. And the details of it are vast, and some of them aren't even important. We don't need to know how these crafts are empowered, how they power their craft. We don't need to know what they talk to each other all day. We don't need to know even about their physiology that much, except for certain things. So the details is really about the reality, purpose, and meaning of contact. We are the native race of a world that's being interfered with and visited. And the native race's history is one of the components that we need to be really aware of and bring into the picture here. Because we know what's happened to the native races, the world facing intervention, visitation, and intervention. So we have to be very sober about this. And we have to be courageous about this. It's not a human universe out there. And we are not important within it. Our world is valuable, certainly. But humanity, no, we're a grain of sand on a beach as far as the eye can see. That's one way of looking at the universe in terms of its massive expanse. So there are 4 fundamental questions we have to bring into this picture, which I'll be referring to. What is happening? What is practically, physically happening? Why is it happening? What does it mean? And how do we prepare? Now, 60 or 70 years of honest UFO research has dealt with what is happening. And it's been slow, but it's evidential and it's good. We're being visited. There's a physical craft. We could talk about other dimensions, but that doesn't help us. That's not the reality we really have to deal with right now. Why is it happening? Well, that remains a big question with lots of debate. What does it mean? Big question, lots of debate. How do we prepare? Nobody has an idea. To know how you prepare, you have to know what you're preparing for or preparing to deal with, right? So these 4 fundamental questions are essential, and humanity has only involved itself seriously or deeply in the first question, which doesn't help us understand what we're dealing with beyond very basic elements. So I'm giving you a broad overview of the alien presence in the world based on what has been revealed to me today, and based upon testimony and evidence from 40 years of studying this subject. So we're living in kind of an age of contact. I know age is a long period, but we're living in maybe an era of contact. But contact is going to be ongoing because we live in a world that is valued by others. And we're actually degrading a world that's valued by others. So that one sentence alone gives you an idea of why races would come here and invest themselves. The forces in the world today have been here 80 to 100 years. And they're very different from any forces that came before. There's no evidence of real alien habitation in our world, at least in the age of historical evidence. So to understand these things gives us a way to approach this in a more practical and evidential and objective way, which apparently is quite lacking in how most people approach the subject. It's fulfillment of their dreams, their hopes, or it's something that fits into their ideology or religious views or something like that. So I bring pieces to this that I think are missing, and I think will make the picture much clearer. But as an overview, I'm giving you an entry point in ways to see this, because the details are important, and I don't have the time today to go into many of those details, even though I know many of them. This is all to enable us to see more clearly and to respond more realistically to the long evidence of visitation, habitation in our world. 80 to 100 years is not visitation. It's the attempt at habitation. So why contact now? Why not 100 years ago, 500 years ago, any time in history? Well, first, we're creating a world that other races can use, an infrastructure. Maybe a primitive infrastructure from their standpoint, but a functional infrastructure. Trade, commerce, communications, even earth sciences. I doubt many aliens understand earth sciences in any kind of detail. So we have created an entire foundation for another race to interact with and to use, to utilize. And it's evidential that they can't live here. So they would need us to help them do whatever they're going to do here. We live in a world of biological hazard for a foreign entity, particularly for races who live in sterile environments in space. It's been estimated in science that there are 1,300,000 different vectors, viruses, bacteria that could make us sick, us humans. and only 30,000 of them have been actually studied. So we live in a world of huge biological hazard to a visitor, which is probably why civilization has not been attempted here before, in part. It's also happening because there's dangerous divisions growing within nations and groups within our world, and we're destroying the world's environment, the value of the earth. We've also reached, again, a level of technological development that makes intervention here valuable. We've done much of the work for them if that is their intent, to have permanent residence here. And we would be potential workforce for them if they can't actually live here. So most of the physical evidence you see of aliens is probably, or may not be, their biological evidence. It may be some kind of suit or garment they wear for protective reasons. We'll see. So humanity is in a state of decline now, declining resources, changing climate, which is going to have huge impact, and is having huge impact, and will increasingly. There's huge global divisions aligning against one another in the world, and the threat of war is increasing, not decreasing. So these challenges have brought a hidden alien force in the world, a force that does not disclose itself, does not reveal its activities, its purpose, or its goals, and to this day remains hidden from us very carefully. Of course, the people that they interact with, they tell them we're here to rescue you, give you everything you need, save you from destroying yourself, all these kinds of things that are very compelling. But the fact is they've never been able to demonstrate any of this. They're just foreign beings with high technology. High technology is not high spirituality. It's not high social awareness. It doesn't represent free races or freedom in society. So a lot of promises have been made, and there's very little to support it. So this contact we're undergoing now, in my view, is the most consequential event in history. As is our emergence into the greater community of life, the most consequential event in history. But it's happening not from our ventures into space or our discoveries into space, but from the presence of those who are visiting here for their own purposes. So the world has been visited many times in history. There's a lot of evidence of, not a lot of evidence, but evidence of that. But no evidence of real civilizations, at least in the time of human history. So to think that they claim that we've been here before, we're your progenitors, we're your fathers, we're the source of everything you have, is just a ridiculous kind of proposition. But people do believe it. And so we now have a foreign and new set of forces in the world, active here for 80 to 100 years. So the key thing is to think about is we are destroying a planet that's valued by others. We are destroying a planet, its value, a planet desired by others. Of course there's intervention. Visitation is where you show up and ask, can we visit, and how should we visit, and where do you want us to be, and how do you want us to be with your population? None of that's happened. This is intervention. Destroying a world of value is valued by others brings intervention. The colonial explorations of the 17th, 18th centuries was all about value. Europe was running out of resources, the great wealth in the New World. It was a source of searching for wealth that made those expeditions necessary. So let us not think that these are spiritual, enlightened beings coming to nurture us into some kind of different state of being. We're the natives of the New World. You have to remember that. So 2 world wars and the advent of nuclear weapons have brought them here now in full force, increasing numbers. I'd like to begin with this teaching from the Greater Community Book 2. Greater Community is one of the books of the New Message teaching, entitled Contact with Life in the Universe. All those visiting your world at this time are part of the intervention. There's more than one group. Within each group, there are different races of beings functioning at different levels of responsibility. So the intervention has many faces, and this will be very confusing to you here on the ground. And it is very confusing. So I make clear these are physical beings in physical craft here for prosaic reasons. They may be here for other reasons. They may be from some other dimension. But you have to answer these fundamental questions first. But people often bypass it to go something much more mystical, desirable, and less threatening. Well, if they're from the future, they're not here to harm us. If they've been here forever, they're not here to harm us. Or, if they're celestial, they're not here to harm us. So what's underneath that kind of emphasis? But a fear of dangerous contact. So we must approach this at the physical level first, before entertaining other possibilities. There are other possibilities. But we risk missing the obvious if we go to those other possibilities. Non-consensual and therefore unethical visitation is being forced upon us without disclosing, as I said, its purpose, presence, and goals. So now alien craft are being seen increasingly, maybe purposefully, in the world today in the last few months. But it's been evident throughout history, but not to the degree as it's occurred in the 20th century and in present time. So we have to face this with an open mind without preferences. If you think it's here the way you want it to be, you will not see anything but yourself. So the degree you can be objective, which means you have no preferences, is the degree in which you can see this clearly. This is kind of a lesson of life, too. Think about relationships. If you look at somebody with desire and ambition and preference, you're not really seeing who they are. You don't know anything about who they are. So this idea of objectivity is very important. So what contact represents? At the most fundamental nature, which is not how people usually look at this, it's an act of nature. Competition for resources and dominance. Been going on in our world since the evolution of life began. It's competition for resources. And at the top of that food chain, what race is dominant at any particular time? Often for very practical reasons. So contact is inevitable, particularly if we're destroying a planet desired by others. Contact and intervention are both inevitable and have occurred and are occurring. The question is, when will it come? Why will it come? Well, it's already here, so it's already come. Why has it come? Why would any race spend 80 or 100 years investing themselves in being in the world if they didn't seek the value of the world? So one of the key ideas I want to share with you to consider, it's very important to do this, is they're not here for us. We're just the natives. Okay, we're intelligent to a certain degree. We've created certain real things, yes. We have a certain degree of order in the world and a great deal of disorder in the world. And we're basically warlike and disorderly. So they're here for the world. No race in the universe is going to come and invest that kind of energy to help prop up basically a conflicted and disunited race. We're not that important, sorry. But the world, that's important. A world of this biological diversity in a universe of barren planets, man, I tell you, it's gold. It's golden. Think how rare a tree is in the universe. And biology doesn't just create scenery and fruit production, it creates medicines, which all, organic beings need. It's essential for life because it's life-giving. And many of these races have already depleted their own worlds and now must search abroad for the things that they need. Because high technology does not diminish your needs, it actually amplifies your needs. Not only do you need the basics of life, now you need all the elements that can sustain your advanced technology, which may not be found on your own planet. So that's another story. So who are they? And what are they not? Who are they? These are small groups of resource explorers and economic collectives. Resource explorers, small groups, economic collectives. Economic collectives means they're multiracial. They're here for the value of the world that we're destroying. We're only useful to them. They can't live here. They can't live into the biohazard of the world. It would take them centuries to even evolve to be able to adapt to that. But we have. So we're useful. They're not going to destroy us. They're not going to attack us. They're not military. There's no evidence that they're military. Oh, they protect their craft, but I mean, there's just not a military force. There's a reason for that, which I don't have time to go into today. Why anyone who visits this world is not a military force. But they don't demonstrate that. So this represents intervention for the purpose of access and gaining dominance in the world. They can't live here, so they need us. But they're not here for us. The reason everyone goes off course here is they think it's here for us. Oh, well, they've been nurturing us all along. They're part of our spiritual, they work with the angels to uplift us. So they're here to turn us into a really mature and united race. Well, how could they do that without taking over the world? Completely. So we're going to give over the reins of the world on a hope and a promise that they're going to help us mature and live successfully and harmoniously in such a way that we can preserve the environment. That's self-gratifying. It's all about me, us. The universe is not about us. It's about worlds and resources. People think or imagine that if you become highly technological, you don't need resource anymore. Everything comes from everything. You can take the matter of space and turn it into everything you want. It's foolish thinking. It's not evidential. These beings are in craft, physical craft. They've had to create these craft with resources we don't have, using chemistry we don't know. They've come from far away. They're not nearby, probably. But the one thing I want you to know is they have studied us for a long time. Why? Because we've been broadcasting out into space every aspect of our society, our wars, our conflicts, our suffering, our degradation of the earth. They know a lot about us. We don't know anything about them. And they want to keep it that way because they're here for their own purposes. This is a quote now from the Greater Community book on Chapter 8, Preparing for the Greater Community. You are facing competition from beyond the world. These forces are not here to eliminate humanity, but to corral humanity and to gain ascendancy in the world, for they cannot live in this environment. They need human assistance. It is a dangerous situation. Competitors are in the world today functioning in a clandestine manner, and human fantasy and speculation and projection regarding life and the universe have little to do with the realities that you must face. Now, it's strange that I'm the only one presenting these kind of ideas, apparently, at least in the media. I mean, this is so obviously evidential and based upon our own understanding of competition in nature and history and everything. But everyone's going off in all directions, trying to unite this with their philosophical views or political agenda. So everyone's off in the weeds, beating around the bush, not going into the bush. But the most elemental questions are being answered here in a way that's very understandable to us. People think, oh, they're incomprehensible, we'll never understand why they're here, what they're doing. That's ridiculous, because behavior denotes intent. It's not what people say, it's what they do. The intent of being hidden in the world, avoiding our militaries, avoiding human awareness, taking people against their will, and I'll be talking about that, and using them to some kind of program of hybridization. This is all evidential now. It's come out. So we have to look at this very seriously as the native peoples of the world, because we know what's happened to native peoples of the world before. Not all natives. There are certain nations in the world, and I think of Japan in this regard, that never allowed intervention to overtake them, except in World War II. So, so the demonstrations of contact are very evidential. And reports of sightings and unknown objects are being demonstrated all over the world. Even on a formal level, about 50,000 of them are being recorded in databases a year by the public. How many are recorded by the military? Well, that could be 100 or 1,000 times bigger than that. And there's growing evidence of invasive, non-consensual interperson contact, abductions with missing time experiences associated with it. And the people who are taken are given screen memories, so they don't really remember what happened to them. Only kind of a good narrative like, well, they helped me, or they were good, or we did good things together. But they have to live with the trauma of their experience for the rest of their lives. And these people will never be willing or able to uncover what really happened to them in these experiences. But this is for interbreeding. If the intervention can't live here, it needs human beings who can be aligned to them fully. Human body, alien mind, or alien-focused mind, to do their work for them here. Clearly, 8 billion unruly and often dangerous human beings can't do that. Not for them. So there's been interference at our military or nuclear facilities that shows a force and presence. 1982 in Ukraine, what is now Ukraine, what was the Soviet Union, a large craft entered the proximity of a nuclear launch facility and set the missiles to launch remotely. And the staff feverishly tried to shut it down and were unable to do so. And finally, in the last moment before launch, the alien craft switched it off and flew away. What is that? Is that a friendly force here saying, don't do that? No. This says, we control you, you don't control us. We can also launch your nuclear weapons too, by the way, whenever we want, at least from bases like that. So this is very aggressive behavior, because any force that's going to come here and establish itself is aggressive. These are not loving, quiescent beings who live in peace and harmony. These are resource explorers, economic collectives, hunters for resources. So their behavior denotes intent, secrecy, interference with our military establishments, taking people against their will, sowing false narratives about who they are with certain people, some of their representatives. We'll talk about their representatives here in a minute. It's sowing the seed that they're here for good, even though they don't do any good. That's substantial. They can claim we're the source of all your discoveries, but that's just a narrative. It doesn't mean anything. So there's a common error in understanding this I'd like to speak about. And that is, if they're not attacking us, they must be here to benefit in some way. But that's illogical, because attacking us one extreme, serving us is another extreme. What happens to all the other possibilities in between? No race can attack us because they destroy the value of the world and us and maybe even themselves. And there is no evidence they're really here to do anything for us except try to manipulate us from their hidden presence, which, by the way, is in oceans now. It's very good because apparently human science only has 5% of the world's oceans mapped. So they can reside out there. We never know where they are exactly. So this is a quote from the Greater Community book, Chapter 1, Humanity's Emergence into the Greater Community. And then this one book, by the way, is really critically important in elaborating in greater detail than I can today exactly what I'm emphasizing here. Races from the greater community are already here, interfering in human affairs, seeking to establish themselves as centers of power and influence here, operating secretly behind the scenes, influencing people in positions of power, taking citizens against their will, functioning in ways that are highly dangerous and hazardous for the human family. That's a very hard thing for people to face. I'm not telling you what you want to hear. Most people either don't want to think about this at all, and that's most people, or if they do think of it, it's got to be either neutral or for a benefit. But no race is going to be here for 80 years and be neutral, and they're doing nothing for a benefit, except challenging us surreptitiously. But there are certain problems to understand the alien presence. First, they cannot be easily seen because they remain to be hidden. Oh, sure, you see craft in the sky, you see lights going across the sky that don't fly like airplanes, either going very fast or in a zigzag fashion, which our airplanes can't do, or stopping a dead stop after going, 1,000 miles an hour. We don't have crafts that can do that. And our governments, which have been studying this, many of the major governments in the world, since the end of World War II, particularly the United States and Russia, now China, they don't disclose what they know for various purposes. But clearly they're dealing with a power greater than theirs. So they want to have parity with this power in some way, otherwise they're going to feel helpless. And no government's going to admit to its population is facing an adversary for which it has no defenses. That would create disaster and mayhem. And here we're neglecting our lessons in history, because history has taught us that intervention is always to benefit the intervening force, to the degradation or even elimination of the native peoples. So that's our lesson from history. I never hear people talk about that. And yet, that's what life's taught us. Anybody who comes to our world forcefully or secretly must fall into this category, in my opinion, or highly, highly suspect of doing so. So there's desire and prevalence and ambition. They're here to help us. They're going to give us what we want. We only have to accept them. It's our governments that are standing in the way. So this creates a wedge between the public and their governments, which is a divide and conquer strategy. You get the natives to lose all faith in their leaders and their spiritual leaders and believe in the forces that are intervening. They're the ones who are going to save us. We can't save ourselves. So when that happens, people can't make any kind of clear evaluation of the NHI. They want things from the intervention, alien technology, solutions to all our problems, even take us into space, open the doors to the universe, connect us with other enlightened beings in the universe. These are all narratives spun by the intervention, which, as I have said, has been studying us for a long time and knows exactly how to win us over. I mean, we're not that complicated. I think we're deep and complicated at a deeper level. They may not understand that at all. But at a basic surface human nature level, we're very predictable. So if you want something from the intervention, you will only see yourself. You will not see it. This is what happens. When you have strong preference about something, you only see yourself. Whether you're seeing another person, or you're seeing an opportunity in the world, you're seeing an event in the world, if it's all about personal gain and benefit, you're only seeing yourself. You're not seeing what's going on. You have no idea what's going on. And the problem about not knowing about this is because we don't know anything in the universe about the universe. We may try to discern behavior and intent from visitation, which can be done, but it's very difficult. But if you know nothing about life in the universe, where these beings come from, who they serve. If they're intermediaries, they serve greater powers. Who are they? And why aren't they here? What limits them? Why are they not military? There's a reason for that. Because conquest is not allowed in this region of space. That is something I have to bring to you from the outside in. People don't figure that out. You could figure it out, but people don't, for the most part. So we need to know how races interact with each other. What does competition look like out there? What are the existential dangers and hazards of living in space? Huge, particularly if you're a wealthy, biologically wealthy nation, a world like ours, and you have good resources and you have some technology. My God, you're like a prize. So without this greater understanding, we become anthropocentric, which is human-centered. Oh, they're like us, only different. No, they're not like us, and they are different. The thing we have in common is we all live in nature, and the forces of nature are resident in the universe as well as in the world. They could be transcended to a certain point, but not completely. That's very important to understand. From a natural history standpoint, this is intervention with the purpose of dominance, because that's what history has taught us from the beginning of our scientific understanding. So it's a non-human universe out there, and if we project our human values upon it, we will be incredibly ignorant and foolish. So the new message is here giving us a vast teaching about life in our local universe. Not everything we want to know, everything we need to know, in order to teach us about contact. Reveal what we are facing now with the intervention. Why would they come here? What do they need? What are they looking for? Who sent them? Who do they work for? Why do they have to be secret? How intervention happens even in our region of space. If we were a single world out there in the middle of nowhere in the universe, well, we'd be open to everything, and nothing would be restraining intervening forces. But in fact, our world's in the proximity of a great network of trade. The network of trade, which has been built over millennia, has made war, not really possible between its member nations or other worlds around it. So this is a very big teaching that I don't have time to go into today, which I will teach about in the future. And it's also how humanity is regarded by our neighbors, not just those intervening, but our actual neighbors. I mean, if you look at us from the outside, it looks pretty bad. Human beings are destroying the world and each other at a phenomenal rate. And are gaining ever more technology to do that more efficiently. So this brings us now to the tools of the intervention. These are tools often to stimulate confusion, to make it difficult for us to see and know what we're looking at. So the intervention has been here in a long process of establishing its presence in the world. And through that, interviewing certain leaders in the arenas of government, commerce, and religion. And more importantly, even a growing influence on growing numbers of people who either are drawn to them because of their promises that now feed through certain individuals that spread these ideas. You can see that all over the internet, by the way. All without public awareness or consent. Nothing they do here has public awareness or consent, really. So this is a divide and conquer strategy. Fool the natives into thinking that they need what you have, and they shouldn't trust their own leaders or customs, societal customs, and they'll begin to gravitate towards you, particularly if their societies are in trouble or breaking down or so forth. The other thing is this force is not really neutral. It's fomenting war. It wants the major nations to compete with each other, even fight each other, without the use of nuclear weapons, though. That's the line. Because it degrades their power and their influence and their credibility to their own populations and to the whole world. People are so afraid this is a threat, they so not want to go there that they completely give themselves over to everything else that's possible. When the threat narrative is evidential through the alien behavior, their activities, and the demonstration of their intent. They have no regard for us. We're only to be used. They don't relate to us. They don't have freedom themselves. They don't live in cultures like we live in cultures. They live on craft or in communes or some other kind of facility that we don't know about. And they're also manipulating spiritual values by thinking that they represent spiritual forces who are here to save us, as if God has sent them to save us. But they have to do it in the background because otherwise we wouldn't accept them. Sounds good, but evidentially doesn't hold up. And they also minimize people to use their native, intuitive ability to discern their presence and their activities. That gets switched off right away. You're overwhelmed with people who are taken, are certainly overwhelmed with a vast experience that destabilizes them to such a point that they'll probably never be the same. Though they claim they're here for peace and purpose and to empower humanity, there's no evidence of that. So these alien narratives have been going on for decades, focused on the public. And the public is responding. I mean, I've just recently been told to me, you're one of the few people in the world who's talking about a threat narrative, which is incredible. Native peoples don't understand that. But the level of persuasion being cast on the public, certain parts of the public, is very significant. And part of their instrument of persuasion is the threat of nuclear destruction. Abductees are even shown, this has been reported by abductee reports for decades, they're shown images of nuclear war, saying, if we're not here, this will happen to you. No explanation, just that's happening, we're here to make that not happen for you. Wow, it's pretty persuasive. The other thing is the intervention wants to keep our focus on the government disclosure, government malfeasance, government hiding things, government corruption, fighting with each other, fighting with our governments. Who's looking at the intervention? We don't need disclosure from the government as much as we need disclosure from the intervention, and they're not going to give it. So it has to be given through other means, spiritual powers, and even through foreign observers, the allies of humanity, who send a set of briefings here to say, people of Earth, you need to know what's happening. We're not in your world. No one should be in your world. You're not ready for visitation. You don't have the species maturity. You don't have the unity. You don't have a central source of government to speak for the whole world. No beneficial race is ever going to visit the world under those circumstances. And every race that does is here to sow their own seeds of power. So we think, I hear people say, oh, they're so complex, we'll never understand what they're doing, why they're here. It's ridiculous. It's an act of nature. Who governs the world? But that means you have to deal with the threat narrative. So there's strength and dominance. It's even going on with drones all over the world right now. Show of their presence. For purpose? Well, some purposes. I'm not going to go into that today. Go to slide. This is from the Greater Community Book, Chapter 2, Contact with Intelligent Life in the Universe. This reality and awareness is not fearful. It is just real. It is the reality of life. This is what intervention has taught you throughout history. It is always carried out for self-interest, and those races who are being discovered face great danger of destruction and subjugation. Can't argue with that. So in conclusion, our self-confidence is being eroded from the inside out and from the outside in, but more so from the inside out. What do we believe? Who do we trust? What within ourselves do we trust? Do we trust an alien narrative, even though it sounds very persuasive, even though it makes us want things we don't have? And we're certainly being guided to not trust the government, which is a divide and conquer strategy. And the more the government doesn't disclose, the more that distrust now expands, becomes more deep set and more hard to correct in the future. So they're creating a vacuum of confidence. I don't know what you believe, but you're going to believe in something. You can't say, oh, I don't believe anything. No, you believe in something. You hold to something. Maybe fitfully or not very securely, but you hold to something. So when you break people's confidence in their society, in their leadership, human leadership, or the value of humanity itself, then you create a vacuum of confidence that a foreign race can fill. Not through evidence, but through promises and displays of power. Because that's all they can do. They can show you the power of their craft to evade you. They can zip around the world like there's nothing interfering with them, but they really can't provide anything because they're only resource explorers and economic collectives, fooling very successfully a vast American public that's becoming aware of them. So revealing this truth in the democratic nations is the most possible because information is freer, maybe not totally free, but freer than it is in totalitarian states. And this disclosure is necessary if we are to reveal and assist, if we're to reveal the intervention and to resist its influence over us. Because the only thing that can stop the intervention is people's resistance to it. Not military resistance only, though that may be part of it, but personal resistance. We will not be turned. We will not be turned against each other by this force. We will not give our power over to an unknown, non-disclosing force, no matter what they say or show. Because we're the native peoples of the world. We better know what native peoples have to deal with facing intervention. Life has taught us that. So I go back to this initial statement. We're destroying the value of a world that is desired by others. They're not going to take it by force because force is not allowed in this region of space because of the great networks of trade. And they're not going to use force because they destroy the value of the world and us as a resource, and maybe themselves too. So our job, this is the one thing I will say, the one thing can unite a fractured humanity. I can see of nothing else that unite a fractured humanity except a threat from beyond that threatens us all equally. And that is the case. Otherwise, if they gave technology or wealth to the world, who would they give it to? Not everybody. Not even everybody in one nation. They give it to one nation, maybe, or two. And that would make the threat of war even greater. The distance competition between nations even greater and more severe. That would probably wipe out the world in war. But threat unites us. Benefit divides us. I want you to think about that. See, people don't think about these things. So they jump to conclusions that they're self-validating or that feel good. Oh, I feel good saying this. They don't think about these things. I want you to think about these things. And the vast teaching I'm presenting to you to explore will teach you about these things. And you can see for yourself if they really resonate with you deeply. Because things have to resonate deeply. It can't just be ideological on the surface of our minds. If we don't protect and defend human civilization, it will be given away. Our future in freedom and self-determination will be lost. We'll be a dominated race, and there are many of those in the universe. We could be overtaken without firing a shot. We could be seduced. It's seduction that's the real power here. Advanced nations don't just attack each other and take over. They influence each other and take over. And we know from our history what happens when you attack and take over. It just destroys everything, and the healing never happens from it, and it's awful in all regards. So we'll come back to our four fundamental questions. What is happening? Visitation is occurring without our permission, without disclosing its purpose, goals, or intent. Why is it happening? To gain the value and benefit of the world. What it means that we're facing being overtaken and subjugated by a foreign race, particularly as our civilization declines, climate change, resource depletion, war, it's going to decline us. That's a perfect opportunity for intervention to occur here. What must we do? We must recognize intervention and prepare for it. It cannot overtake us with technology. It overtakes us because of the power of influence over us. And that can be recognized and resisted. It has to be. So here I am in somewhat of a lone voice in the world speaking about this, but there are many people who feel this. I know because many people send me letters saying, I've been feeling this my whole life, or what you say rings true to me, or I know I don't know everything about this subject, but I feel we have to be very cautious, careful, and discerning. I get these messages from all over the world. Because there's people in 90 countries studying these writings, which is a good thing. But it's late in the game. We don't have all the time in the world. And we don't need the majority of humanity to rally against this. Just a powerful minority that would drive the intervention away. Because if it can't achieve its goals through persuasion, then it will be revealed. And once it's revealed, it has to withdraw. So this is what's preparing us for life in the universe. Right now, we're pathetic in the universe. Divided, warlike, destroying each other. Oh, man. We're ripe for intervention. But what prepares us to become a free and not dominated race in the universe? Free races are rare, by the way. Then this is the thing that can do this for us. Resisting this intervention is the one thing that can unite us and begin to teach us about life in the universe and how we need to be a free race in the universe. Which today, no one ever talks about that. You have to deal with threat. The universe is a cold, harsh environment. To have technology, to be able to travel in it, exposes you to lots of other forces. Even living on a valuable planet like Earth exposes you to lots of other forces. This is a quote from the Greater Community book again, chapter 3, Facing the Greater Community. If humanity knew anything about life in the universe, you would resist any visitation to your world. You would not be foolish and idealistic regarding this. Your governments would prepare your peoples. Everyone would be watchful, watching the skies, reporting any sightings. you would resist any visitation because humanity is not ready. And no beneficial race is ever going to come here and try to gain access to the world. Who would they talk to? America? China? Russia? Saudi Arabia? Iran? You see what I'm saying? The time of beneficial interaction is not now. This is where we're vulnerable. And our vulnerability is being exploited very aggressively. So things you can do, pay attention to major sightings that are now happening in the world. Not with hope and benefit in mind, but just what are you looking at? What does it evoke deeply within you? Does it give you reassurance or does it give you concern? At a deeper level, we get things. We can see things much more clearly than we do with the notion of our ideas and beliefs and desires. Desire is totally blinding here. You can share this understanding with others. Become educated about the non-human intelligence in the world. It can be studied. It's being revealed through this teaching and through many other things that are occurring. Because behavior denotes intent. If you're clear about the behavior, then the intent becomes pretty obvious. Even if they're hidden. I mean, to be hidden for 80 years is intent. To be trying to weaken military establishments or power establishments is intent. It's undermining. Learn a lot about life in our local universe, which is being revealed now for the first time through this revelation that I'm speaking about. I make it free online, available to everybody. It's in translation in many languages. It's important that people have this as a perspective, because otherwise we are the dumb natives who will give over everything for promises that won't be fulfilled. Citizen disclosure. We establish personal boundaries. We need to establish a boundary to the earth. And there's a document I'm going to share with you in a few moments that's about establishing that boundary around the earth. So the intervention cannot succeed without human cooperation and human acquiescence. So stand for human sovereignty and ethical contact. What we're facing now is definitely not ethical contact. So I'm giving you an overview today, broad spectrum. But to really understand this, you're going to have to do some study. Be willing to do that, because the details are important. And if you're going to share this with other people, you need to know some of the details. There's a lot of people who argue against this, thinking they're being very realistic or scientific. They just don't know. They just don't know. But people who build their careers on knowing things often are unwilling to admit what they don't know. So I want to offer to you now some of the resources that we have available to us. The first is the Greater Community book, which is one of the books of the New Message. It's about life in the universe. Greater Community, Life in the Universe. Chapter 8, I've used a lot for this presentation, but all the chapters in there, there's 16 or 17 of them. They all cover aspects of this, and they're very important. If you're going to do a one-book read, then that's very important. We have the Allies of Humanity, and there's a 12-point summary about the 4 briefings. And the briefings, being reading those, I'm telling you, if you want to know about life in the universe, what it's really like out there, and what would bring anyone into the world under the present circumstances, that is really important. And that's available at alliesofhumanity.org. And then lastly is a Declaration of Human Sovereignty, which is linked here. And you can go read that. It's based on the Declaration of Independence of the United States, but now brought in the specter of humanity facing a greater community or facing intervention from races from beyond. Then there's longer studies, the whole Allies of Humanity briefings, books 1 through 4, are urgent message about the extraterrestrial presence in the world today. And there's Life in the Universe, which is an incredible new message teaching. Part 1 is about life in the universe. Part 2 is about spirituality in the universe. Amazingly informative and expansive. And it keeps those things apart, because practical physical life should not be misconstrued with spirituality. Spirituality is happening at another level in physical interaction. It interfaces with our physical life, but it's not the same reality. So this book separates the physicality of life in the universe, the reality, from the spirituality. It's very helpful to do that because then they stand alone. If you mix them, everything becomes clouded. Now you can't seem to understand reality because it's mixed with things that aren't a part of it. You can't understand spirituality because it's mixed with things from the world that are not part of it. And so that's a really important point of clarity. So I'd like to stop now. Thank you for listening. This has been a big thing to consider, and it's going to take time for you to discover it more on your own. You have to come to it on your own. It's not just about believing things. It's about putting things together. It's about connecting the dots. And there are real dots here that you can connect. You don't have to be brilliant or exceptional to do this. Just be sincere, honest, and practical. And that will take you to see the big picture, which must be seen now as much as possible. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Marshall. Yeah, thank you for taking the journey to know for yourself what this is, for your work on disclosing this reality, and also providing the resources that we need to do what we need to do. So next we'll have the opportunity to answer 2 questions that will be related to Marshall's teaching today. And we'll transition to the live broadcast chat where Carol Coffey will be hosting. The link is in the description below, and we'll respond to these 2 questions. Regarding this message on preparing for contact, did anything impact you? What do you see? And is there anything in this message that you feel compelled to share with others, with other people? So let's go to the chat, and we'll have a 30-minute discussion of the questions there, and see you there. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the live stream. At this time, we're going to actually start. Marshall's going to be responding to some of the comments that were made during the chat on the live broadcast chat. So thank you for all of that you have shared. And we'll go with this first comment. And this is from Matt. And he says, "What impacts me is that the visitors are physical and all physical beings require resources. That essentially explains why they are here."
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, that's actually very clear. And I think that people who want to think of this as phenomenally complex and multi-level and multi-dimensional or whatever may not see the obvious. And this should be the starting point. And they're physical craft. They had to get here for physical means. They're physical bodies. I mean, if you go beyond that and don't treat it at that level, then you're never going to understand this. You will have so many confusing elements that you'll be lost. You're basically lost. Or you'll think of it as a higher dimension thing that, and really it's just basic nature. It's competition in nature. And the truth is that resources in the universe are rare. We live in a universe of resource limitation, as we do in our world. This is what generates the development of growth and civilizational growth of technology, growth of science, growth of everything, because we live in a world of limited resources. And so we have to find out how to utilize those resources, how to protect them, how to share them with other people. We fight over them too, of course. So to think that everything's abundant out there is just nonsense. I mean, that's just not life. And people want to think that life out there is everything we don't have here, but that's not an intelligent way to approach this. And races wouldn't go out of their way to be here unless they wanted something that we have. And you have to ask, you have to treat it at that level. That's an emphasis. And the fact that people don't do that is one of the reasons why people are all over the place in dealing with this subject. You can't seem to answer the other three questions. Why is it happening? What does it happen? How do we prepare? People can't even get beyond the first question. So here we are.
Okay. Thank you, Marshall.
Uh-huh.
And then there's this comment from Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
And what she is saying is, "What I see is an enormous learning curve for humanity in accepting and learning about this reality. We are still so easily seduced by pretty words and so often fail to learn from history."
Yes, that is the situation. So our goal here is not to convince everybody. That's impossible. People are going to either not deal with this at all, which is likely to be many people, or they're going to deal with it only on their terms, which is not an intelligent way to deal with this. You have to deal with it on its terms, or the terms of nature, we should say. So the goal is to understand this yourself and share it with people who can understand it and want to know more. This is how the knowledge and wisdom about preparing for the greater community is shared. And broadcasting for something like this out into the world, which I've been doing for quite a while now, enables those people to respond and to have more information in which to respond. So if you're a practically oriented person and you know how to do problem solving in life, you're probably more likely to be able to understand this even at the outset than somebody who always just thinks about possibilities, what should be, which is kind of not a very effective way of dealing with what life presents. So obviously this is to a person who's practical and has a sense of nature and the reality of living in a competitive environment called the world. Well, the universe is a competitive environment too, just on a vastly greater scale. So what she's saying here is true, but I'm not trying to reach everybody. I don't think that's possible. The messenger tries to reach those who can receive the message and adopt it and support it and resonate with it. So that's my position. And so I know everything else is going to happen, all forms of objection and disagreement and avoidance, of course. It's not pleasant to deal with that. It's frustrating. It's disheartening at times, but it's the way things are. Excuse me. Okay.
All right. Thank you. And then we have Louise, has a comment with a question. If I want to resist and say no to the intervention, where do I say it? To whom? Who can hear it?
Well, first of all, that's good. Say it to yourself, and then say it to people for whom that would be relevant, who are looking at this phenomenon or impacted by this phenomenon emotionally or even practically. To say no to intervention is a statement of position. And why would you say that? Because intervention is unethical, and it's dangerous, and it's harmful to humanity, and can destroy our dominance and presence in this world. So, yeah, but definitely say no to yourself, because there's a lot of agreement out there that people want to take advantage of this opportunity. They see it as opportunity. Particularly in the United States, we don't have a history of intervention, really. The Native Americans certainly do. So Americans tend to think about things in terms of what's in it for me, what's the advantage, what's the angle. When you go to a foreign country that's been colonized, and some people say, well, it's colonization. Well, they're more likely to say that because that's their history. And it's to shape the world they live in and the consequences of it. So just know who you're speaking to. I wouldn't present this at a dinner table with family members who have no interest or understanding of this. But to people who do have an interest or a curiosity, you could say why you would say no to intervention and maybe express some of the reasons why. So if you actually study some of the materials that I presented here, you'll become more informed about what I've really been talking about, and will be better equipped to say why you would say no to intervention. What's the reasoning behind doing that? What's the evidence behind doing that? So I've given you resources here to be able to answer questions that others will pose to you, as well as answers that you will naturally have for yourself and should have. I'm not telling you the whole picture here. I'm inviting you to explore the reality of this, because people want simple answers to big questions, and that's not life. Big questions are usually complex. They have a time frame, sequence, or sequential understanding. They're difficult to deal with. So you have to really dedicate yourself to some degree to be able to penetrate and not just accept the obvious of what you think in the moment or what other people think in the moment. So a lot of people are interested in the subject are not people who have a native interest in this. They're people who are coming to it for benefit. And there's a core of people, or a smaller group of people, who have an innate interest to know. They were born with a greater community awareness within themselves, or they've been impacted by it in some way, either visually or otherwise. And for them, it's a more serious question and approach. Everyone else is just a phenomenon of the time. So be careful to know who you're talking to if you're going to share this with someone. And listen to them first to see where they really are. Okay.
Okay. All right. Next, we have Alan Joshi, and he asks, Marshall, what's the best way to address the level confusion people have regarding spiritual and extraterrestrial realities?
Oh, that's a big question, Alan. And I think, first of all, you have to be really clear in yourself how these are different. Now, these overlap with each other. Spirituality overlaps with physical reality. They're just not the same realities. But they have an overlap. This is where religion comes into the world. It's where people have spiritual practices or spiritual understanding. So there's an overlap. But the practical needs of the day are not spiritual. They're survival. Physical survival, social survival, maybe survival, in terms of war and conflict in the region in which you live. So spiritual gives you a bigger dimension to your life and a greater sense of purpose or meaning. But these are not the same level. So as I said, when people confuse these levels, they both become faded, because the spiritual and the physical are not the same. The physical is temporary. Spiritual is permanent. A permanent reality is not the same as a temporary reality, but it can serve a temporary reality. So there's an overlap. There's a hierarchy here. Spiritual is in a higher place than the physical. Just it represents a part of us. It's in a higher plane of existence than our physical, practical mind or our body sensations. So if you see this more hierarchical and not try to make them the same, then you can benefit from both of these realities, as you should.
Okay. Next, we'll hear from Mark. He made a comment in the chat, and he says, I was impacted by the need to discern intent. So few and so little discussions about this important and crucial topic, NHI intent. It is the focus on this topic that can clear away so much noise and so much obfuscation of what otherwise is so straightforward and pretty obvious.
Well, that's a very good question, Mark. Well, if NHI is not the focus, then it's just all about us. And people love to go there because that's what they're familiar with. If they don't know anything about NHI or are afraid to think about NHI particularly in an objective way, then it's all about us. And the government wants to keep us all about us. And the intervention wants to keep it all about us. So our eyes are not looking at it. People focused on each other, their conflicts, their understanding, they're getting meaning from each other, they're getting cues from each other, they're dividing over issues, they're contesting certain things. So that's why the government, which is really the second level of importance here to the NHI, whether the government discloses or not, the NHI are doing what they're doing. And it's the world of people that's being directly impacted. The government may be infiltrating, the NHI may be trying to infiltrate the government, but it's definitely infiltrating the public. So it's the public sphere that's the most important. And I think even people in the government who want to disclose but do not want to involve the public would love the public to become more educated because that takes the burden off of them. Because for them to disclose, they'd have to reveal so much about all the dishonest communication and even illegal and unjust behavior on their part of these industries over the course of time. So it creates all kinds of legal problems, social problems, and it would create shockwaves through society. They've been lied to for 60 years, or 70 years. So the government doesn't want to completely lose confidence in the public because that's disastrous. That serves the intervention, actually. So the intervention doesn't want people looking at it, which is why it's hidden. And the only way, and this is the most consequential activity in the world, is abduction and breeding of a hybrid race. That determines their purpose in ways that are unequivocal. And it certainly doesn't want that to be revealed. And of course, if the only way that can come into the focus is through human testimony can always be disbelieved, can always be discounted, can always be objected over. So it's a perfect way to hide. However, people's testimony works in the course of law. Convict people of capital crimes by human testimony, witnesses. If thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are seeing the same thing, reporting the same thing, you can't ignore that. So it's the evidence that people have of their own experience, of their own understanding, particularly experience, direct encounters. Whoa. That's really powerful as evidence. And that's why the subject has to come out. I mean, the writings of Bud Hopkins, Dr. David Jacobs, particularly take this very, very far and are very revealing. But most people are not exposed to this information. So the deepest, darkest part of the intervention is the real interface with humanity, which is the abduction experience. Its purpose, its activities, its methodology, all of that. And if that really could come out, even as a legal framework, because they're capital crimes against humanity. They're kidnapping, they're rape, people are being forced to have sex with other kinds of hybrids or other creatures, and it's murder. Many people don't survive this process, die in the process. Whatever happens to them, bodies are not returned. So kidnapping, rape, murder, going on for 100 years behind the scenes. If you want to turn people against the intervention, if that could come out substantially and be a legal process, then, wow, things could really move. Because that takes away all of the cover, the veneer of hope and promise that the intervention was to sow. So it's a big deal. And it's ugly. so ugly that you can never think of them in the same way once you deal with this. And people are given screen memory, so they don't remember any of these things. They just are told this is really good for you, this will help you, this will help us, help humanity. And they return to Earth with this. And, trauma is something people often bury themselves. So this narrative buries it even further. Because if you've been through something really traumatic in captivity, boy, to face that and deal with that is monumental. And many people will never face it in their experience and live out the rest of their life with this trauma, within them, affecting their relations with others, their relationship with everything. It's truly crimes against humanity we're talking about here. Okay.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Okay, this next comment is from Diane. And she says, I can see how the intervention is putting a wedge between us with non-disclosure by our governments on NHI, leading to a deeper mistrust of our institutions.
Well, thank you, Diane. That's very wise. It's very clear. You see it with the drone phenomenon going on in the world today. Growing phenomenon, people are impacted, governments won't speak the truth, therefore sowing ever greater degrees of distrust in the government, wedge between the government and its peoples, which may be the purpose of these drones. But this is very powerful. It's a divide and conquer strategy. And it's really a problem for the governments to disclose what they know about this because it creates a huge history of misdeeds, crimes, and a violation of even our laws about how things should be studied. The government gives to private contractors things to study. It has to be open to all contractors. Well, that's not happening here. So there's just many, many legal problems with this. But this is the wedge, and you can see it. Don't trust the government. Well, if you don't trust the government, and you don't trust the normal society, that trust is going to go somewhere. It's not like you distrust everything. That never happens. And this is why conspiracy theories are being propagated so much in the last 30 or 40 years. And they definitely have an intervention source, most of them. And some of them are very legitimate, disclosure about misdeeds of government, certainly. But a lot of this really is a wedge. Because if there's too much distrust of the government, too much disparity forced at the government, then you're driving a wedge between the people and their own leaders and institutions. And that's definitely a process of intervention, invasion, if you will. And we do that. We've done that to the United States, done it with other countries too. Drive a wedge between the people and their governments. So this is divide and conquer strategy. It's well known in our world. It's been carried out in many forms, in many ways. So to see it happening on such a great but hidden scale is pretty alarming. People have so much distrust of the government, and the government not being willing or able to disclose. And I don't know if the government you see on TV even knows much about this. The part of government knows about this is way deeper, way more secret. So, and people don't even know that. Even presidents don't really know the whole picture. They don't know what I'm talking about here. They're too great, and they're public figures. They're in office and they're gone. They could talk for the rest of their life about whatever they know. So not much is really revealed to them that's highly secretive. So at the surface of government, there's a lot of ignorance. But to open the deeper doors, that will be necessary, but it's very hazardous. The ontological shock should never be underestimated in doing that. Okay. All right, 2 more.
Okay. Next, we'll have Marshall respond to a comment from Mary. And she says, it always gives me caution when speaking out about the intervention that we are in a privileged position of awareness. It is how we communicate our awareness that must overcome the offense given when we speak out as if we know.
Okay, that's good, Mary. If we were talking about normal kinds of controversies, I would agree with you. If we're talking about something that's threatening the future and freedom of humanity, then you have to speak what you have to speak and let people have their own experience. And if it contravenes their beliefs or they feel offended by it, you have to speak. Otherwise, this is taking the communication down to a level of being adjusted to human capacity. And that may be necessary at the beginning, but at some point, you have to say things that are really big and really strong. And some people will be terrified, some people will be infuriated, some people will be in severe disagreement, some people will resonate. You know, if you're going to tell the truth in the world, you have to be willing to polarize people. Anyone who's ever done that in any field of endeavor has polarized people. Scientists, they polarize their colleagues with new discovery. So to try to be socially acceptable will make you a lame duck, and you will not be able to speak what really should be spoken. Now, I'm careful with individuals, but if you have to speak out into the world, then you have to speak perhaps in a more daring fashion and not tailored down to what is the common denominator, the common denominator of what people can accept, because then you lose the efficacy and the meaning of your own message. Look at me. How many people in the world, the country, can accept what I'm telling you here today? Probably maybe 5%, but 5% is a lot of people. If they take it to heart, they'll look more deeply. If they look more deeply, they'll learn more, and they'll see more of what I'm presenting. It'll make perfect sense to them. It's not a mystery. There's a lot of deception. There's government deception, and there's alien deception. And those are both powerful forces operating in our world at all times. You don't need the government to know the truth. With the Allies Humane briefings, they're saying everything the government won't say and may present things even the government doesn't even know. So the Allies briefings bypasses the government in terms of disclosure. Okay, they come from a foreign source and they're communicated mysteriously. But you know, communication in the middle environment is how advanced races communicate. They don't send text messages to each other. We're just very primitive in our communication. We're still very primitive communication. So it's okay, it's the way it is. But I can't dial this down to too low a common denominator. I could never speak what I need to speak. I let people have their own experience. If they deny it or speak out against it, I accept that as part of the environment that I speak in. Here we go. Let's go one more.
Okay. And this is the last comment that Marshall will respond to today, and it is from Martin. And he says, I'm also very concerned about the ultra-fast development of AI, advanced nanotech, and surveillance, and how this is connected and related to the NHI presence.
Okay, Martin, well, that's a very important statement, and I would tend to agree with you. I think HI offers this tremendous, the efficient technology to use at the beginning. But like all powers, it has to be limited in its scope and application. And that it's being used without that, even by commercial interests or more people who are more aggressive. And then it has this risk of basically making us compliant to a form of technology that's probably well developed beyond our shores and can be planted here and utilized to really not to control our thinking, because one of the things AI does, it gives you a lot of choice, but it only delimits what you can choose between. It doesn't have open-ended questions for you to explore in your life just openly and experimentally and personally. It gives you a broad spectrum of choices. You limit choice. Therefore, you limit awareness. You limit response. So I think AI at the outset, if it was really controlled and limited, could be very helpful. But if it's not controlled and limited, then it becomes a socially erosive power and certainly a power of the intervention. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Marshall. And thank you, everyone, for participating in the live Discord chat today on this really, really important topic. We're facing competition from beyond our world, And Marshall is filling in the missing pieces. It's very important. So much gratitude for the wisdom shared today, that we and others can understand what we are preparing for and how to respond to the reality of contact in the greater community, in our world, which is, active here now. So there will be more teachings coming from Marshall here on the New Message Events YouTube channel. And over the coming months, we'll be able to engage with this again with Marshall and this format. So please be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications and updates on upcoming teachings. And also the world meditations take place on this channel and much more. So to all of us, thank you. So great to be with you today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.